Hi everyone, welcome back to Casual Watch Talk. This is episode 106, believe it or not, and a little brief apology. We didn't do an upload last week. We unfortunately both got busy, but I am joined by Kris.
Hey, how's it going?
Yeah, it's going well.
106, a milestone.
It's our 106th. We need to get to 200, and we didn't make a big fanfare when it was 100 because I think I had a guest on and I totally forgot about it. But
right.
So 200, we'll have to get to 200.
Yeah, I feel like we made a big deal out of like 57 or something, and then time went on. So
maybe we'll just do that. Maybe we'll just make a big deal of random ones. So 106, yay, celebration. Mm-hmm. Well, for our landmark 106 episode, what watch have you chosen to commemorate the occasion? What are you wearing today?
So I have my C65 chronograph. It's I am getting ready to go sailing this weekend with some buddies.
Oh,
and we're gonna sail out to Catalina, and so I figured I'd take the dive chronograph. And the yacht chronograph, the yachting chronograph, wear my boat shoes and go for a sail.
Well, I've only ever got the ferry to Catalina, and I only know one other person that did it on a jet ski, and it took them about 4 hours. So how are you sailing? You're not like wind sailing. This is a
wind sailing. Yeah.
Oh wow.
Yeah, I mean, if you have you got a 37-foot boat, you can catch a pretty big. It does depend on the wind. If the Santa Ana winds are kicking up, then we'll end up motoring out the whole way, and that'll be sad and boring. But as long as we get some offshore wind, we can sail into the wind, and it'll take us longer to get back. But cut through the wind and be there Friday night, Saturday morning.
And if anybody's not familiar with Catalina Island, it's a stunning, beautiful island that most people know through the Will Ferrell film Step Brothers.
That's right.
Because they have the Catalina wine mixer there, which is a real thing.
Yeah, I can. The first time I was out there, we went out with some family, and we did take the ferry out there, and that ferry is a bit of a college frat party on the way.
It is a booze cruise.
It's like the bar opens and there's like, can I have 8 beers before I make it to Catalina? And then we get there, and it was like we took a tour around the island, and it was like the aviary that doesn't have any birds in it, the casino that doesn't have any gambling in it, and the downtown area that has more bars than churches. It was like okay.
I've always liked it there. If this is just off the coast of Long Beach, isn't it?
Yeah. It's kind of a straight shot. It takes, I think the ferry's like an hour or something.
Yeah, and then you can only get around the island on a golf cart unless you're a resident. And apparently there's buffalo on the island, but I've never seen them.
Yeah, buffalo on there. So Hollywood brought a bunch of buffalo out there, and then they went wild, and so ecologists were like, well, let's leave them there. They're fine. They're not hurting anyone, and we'll just do that. And so that's where a lot of the so if you're in a fancy restaurant and you get buffalo meat, that's your it's Catalina buffalo. So
yeah, and also after your meal, if you need to freshen your breath, Catalina's also very famous for having the Wrigley Mansion there. I think
that's right.
The chewing gum empire.
Yeah, that's right. Up on the shore there, and there's like a 10-year waiting list to get cars onto the island, and also I wouldn't even bother. So it's not like Hawaii or even Kauai or even like a tiny island. Like it's not even like that. Like if you got a car there, you could go up one street at 15 miles an hour, and that's pretty much it.
Yeah, it's actually, I know this isn't Watch Talk, but it is quite an interesting island because they get their water from a desalination plant as well, which I think more people should use as well. That's where you basically convert seawater to drinkable water. So they remove,
because there's no natural springs or not enough to supply a town like that. So
yeah, especially
so fun, rattlers. But yeah, like I said, so got the yachting chronograph, the yacht. The 70s, 60s, 70s inspired C65 with the blue dial and the fun colors on it. So got that going on.
Well, I'm wearing my trusty speed timer that I absolutely, I love this thing. I think Seiko have inadvertently created an iconic quartz watch when they were trying to copy one of their other iconic chronographs, mechanical chronographs. But I've been emailing back and forth with the Rolex AD. I'm still on the list for my green mint. It's called mint green now. I'm sure it wasn't originally called mint
I don't
green,
think
it was mint green. Yeah, mint green dial.
Right, I think we were calling it like money green or something.
No money green.
Yeah, no money. Yeah,
where
like
all my green's gone.
Yeah.
So I'm really looking forward to getting that if I can get hold of one. I'm not setting crazy expectations.
Interesting about your Seiko. So you've been wearing it on the bun strap, or you're switched off because it's summer.
Yes, I switched off a little bit because we're going to go to. It started to be the rainy season here in Florida a little bit, and we are going to water parks. So I've had it on an Uncle Seiko, and I've got it on a NATO.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. We watched the latest Stranger Things, and then we started rewatching it, which was I think it holds up. It's great. It's a great series. Anyway, in the first series, Steve has like an old school like champagne dial Timex, I think. It kind of looks like a Timex. It's a super simple dial, but he's wearing it on a bun strap in the first season.
Oh,
I picked that up.
I do love the bun strap that Macola made for this watch. Actually,
and I've been so kind of rewatching it. I've been keyed into like who's wearing what, and there's in like season 3. Someone has the like super bright yellow swatch on, and like it's kind of fun to see. They did a really good job. They did a really good job with the with the time period. I mean, I caught up to season 3, so season 3 is where we're in the mall, and just an absolute perfect snapshot of what it was like in the 80s and in America.
Yes, yeah, it's funny that we got up to season 3 and we kind of drifted off halfway in between, but we need to rewatch it because I think you mentioned it, a few other people have mentioned that series 4 is the show is completely gone off onto a huge tangent now. So to continue this tangent of television, I never had seen Seinfeld really. I watched the odd episode, and I didn't really watch it
because you're a little younger than I am.
Well, also I don't think we got it in the UK, or if we did, it must have been. What we got at that time was we got a ton of Frasier, we got Cheers, we got MASH, we got all of that, but not really Seinfeld.
Cheers. I mean, I feel like Cheers was my dad's show, right? And then Seinfeld was like just as I was getting out of high school and into college, so it was a perfect hit for me.
What's amazing about Seinfeld, we're rewatching it, apart from it being hilarious, and I think a lot of the jokes still stand up, but each series is also a history of Breitling. Because Jerry, he has a different Breitling. Now he's on a Navitimer.
Yeah, so it was interesting. So I actually looked this up. I just rewatched it, like past maybe I think we finished because we'll just put it on in the background, right? Just like something to have on. Because I've seen most of the episodes, so it's just kind of like something to just have TV on when you're just like doing something else. And I looked this up. Apparently, so Jerry has that Breitling for like the first like 4 seasons.
That same Breitling or something.
Yeah, and it's got the bullet bracelet. And at first, like when you see it on TV, it looks like from a distance, it looks like an expensive Breitling on one of those like cheap Spidolflex bracelets.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah, and it does look like an expandable one.
And I'm like, what is he wearing there? And I'm like, and it wasn't until like later, because it was also, we're also spanned like I think that series spanned digital television too. Maybe not. Maybe it was still 4:3. But anyway, the resolution got better, and then you're like, oh, okay, it's that. And then I think like 4th or 5th season when they really hit their stride, and like everybody knew it was a hit and everybody was talking about it all the time, and like Jerry was getting $1 million an episode, and everybody, then it was like, well, they're not going to cancel the show, so I might as well just wear what I want to wear. And so then he shows up with the Navitimer.
Yeah, I'm on the season now with the Navitimer. It's beautiful as well.
Right, and I was like, oh, first appearance of the Navitimer, and then and then from then on, he's got some interesting stuff that he puts on. But yeah, you're totally right. It's just an ad for Breitling at this point. After that,
yeah, talking about we're totally going off on a tangent here. Talking about an ad for Breitling, we do have a topic we're going to talk about. Talking about an ad for Breitling. Adrian at Bark and Jack got invited to the launch event. Well, they say it's a launch event, but as he commented, most of these watches are sold straight away. There was like a 364 limited edition of a Cosmonaut Navitimer. It's an amazing video, because I didn't realize when I saw it, I'm like, that's awesome, that watch. But it's a Navitimer. Did you see this? It's a Navitimer with a 24-hour dial. Like,
yes.
The time is 24 hours because the astronaut needed that.
Right. Yeah, that was so it works. Yeah, it goes 24 hours. So like when it's pointing at the 6, it's 12 o'clock. So yeah, pretty cool. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd love to get in on a Navitimer now, but I think the ship sailed for me on that one, because they are quite expensive now, aren't they?
Yeah, I would, if you wanted to get on a Navitimer, I'd go Zen. At this point, or see if you can find one used. I mean, if you you might be able to pick up a used Navitimer Breitling. You could probably find one. I'm sure there's plenty.
One of my very good friends, who won't be listening to the podcast because he's not into watches, but Matt, who was best man at my wedding, his wife, for their wedding, which was a few years before ours, bought him a Navitimer, and I'm sure they were about £3,000 then, and now they're at 9,000-10,000.
Wow, I was gonna say 5.
No, not at all. Yeah, they're more expensive than a Speedmaster. A lot of the Navitimers now.
Yeah. I think they look cool. But I can't read them, so that's my thing with that. Like, the information on it is like so tiny, and I guess no, that's not my problem. The problem is not that I can't read it. I can put glasses on and read it. The problem is I can't get past the fact that, like, the usefulness of it, all this information on the dial, and the actual practical usefulness of it is near zero.
It's interesting you say that about the busy dial on the Navitimer, because Scott Carpenter, who is the astronaut that this watch was made for, he had a normal Navitimer, and when he was going into space, because he didn't actually land in the moon or anything, he went into space because they were measuring certain things, like how people would digest food and what would happen to the human body, because nobody really knew. Yeah. So he actually went back to Breitling, and similar to what you said, he was like, "There's just a lot of stuff on the dial that I don't."
Yeah, I just can't. Yeah, exactly. Especially like, all right, so you're in a spacecraft, you're pulling 8G on reentry. Right? No, a little bit of vibration and shaking involved, I'm sure, right? And you're gonna be like, oh, let me just calculate the time on target here with my slide rule. It's like,
yeah. So
I guess in an absolute emergency, you'd make it happen, but yeah.
Yeah, so they simplified the dial for him. They made it that 24-hour time as well, because they were very concerned he wouldn't know, obviously, in darkness, whether it would be 2 in the morning or 2 at night. So they made that 24-hour dial. Yeah. His one actually, it's a great story actually, how Dinky did a write-up on it. His one got damaged on when he did a sea landing, because he landed off course because the autopilot broke. But they've redone this watch anyway. They've simplified it. It looks awesome. It's a great story, and good on Breitling. Cool. This brings us to our main topic, and Kris and I were having a conversation, and we'd love to hear your guys' thoughts over on the Facebook group. Are watch companies now tending to more design watches for watch collectors, i.e. catering to nostalgia, vintage elements, to things that watch collectors look for in vintage watches? Are they designing collections around that rather than focusing on a core collection that made them famous in the first place. I might not explain that well, but the example that got me thinking about this was that new Longines Ultra Chron, Ultra Chron, and it's a beautiful dive watch. It's got this high precision movement in it. It's chronometer certified, I think, was one of the first, maybe the first Longines, but it's a very vintage inspired piece. And their last couple have been maybe not references that they produced before, but certainly heavily vintage inspired. And a lot of other companies have been doing this. And I don't know, Chris, what do you think? Do you think people are focusing too much on these vintage or catering to what collectors like rather than creating iconic watches that will bring on a whole new set of collectors in the future?
Right. Are they moving away from I'll just call it like a bread and butter collection? So like, do we think any enthusiasts had a say in what the Hydro Conquest was going to look like? Right?
Yeah, probably not. Yeah,
probably not. I mean, like they were like, all right, so ceramic dive watch, had to be, sporty looking. It like ticks off a bunch of boxes. But I don't think that they went, into the forums and said, what are you guys looking for a modern, sports dive watch? I think that their department came up with that. And you're right. I feel like they're shifting with their vintage stuff. I mean, their reissue vintage. Maybe they're really shifting to a what does the enthusiast market want?
Yeah.
And what can we make that's gonna hit with them?
Yeah, exactly. And just to say, all of these Longines have been absolutely knocking this out of the park. Every one of these that they've released looks absolutely stunning. I guess maybe putting it another way, are they creating watches for the purpose of making them icons rather than designing because a lot of these vintage watches are now icons because they were a tool or they became ubiquitous because they did something really well, like the Submariner, for example.
Right.
So are they're trying to create a watch that is instantly an icon instead of sticking with this core collection that becomes an icon just over time, I guess. Because Rolex never play this game, do they?
Right.
Like Rolex arguably never play this game. But
and can you see, like, can we see, like, in 30 years, are we going to have the Hydro Conquest reissue? You know what I mean? Like, is it are they just making, so, like, is their popularity sort of based on the fact that, like, this utilitarian, we make a group of men's sports watches, and we make a set of women's dress watches, and we make a set of men's dress watches, and we make a, you know what I mean? Like, they just have a collection, and that they've gone from sort of checking off the boxes of, we need a man's watch, we need a lady's watch, we need a diver, we need a chronograph, we need a dress watch, this kind of thing, and focused on the enthusiast. But then have they, is it too far? Now, I like the look of the Ultra Chron, but it does remind me of the Devil Diver from
the Bulova.
Bulova, yeah. It definitely reminds me of, especially with the red hand. It looks cool. The case shape, very, very Bulova reminiscent. But I think Longines has done enough here to make it look their own.
Yeah, and you're right as well. I mean, Bulova are doing this, aren't they? They're going through their back catalogue. And, I mean, arguably, maybe for Bulova, they needed that little bit of... They needed to update the brand by going vintage. But they've definitely been recreating them. I also immediately think of Doxa with their Army edition, the Doxa Army edition, which is an interesting model, but again, they've made that limited edition. This is the other problem. They're creating amazing watches, but that are limited edition, but that are vintage inspired.
Right. Yeah. And like, and then what is, like, what's the too much of a good thing, like what's the ratio of we want to satisfy the fans and the enthusiasts, but we've either strayed too far from our core, or we're we're just making these one-off enthusiast watches, so there's 50 of them, and so then we're like special edition, and then you get this like special edition to death kind of thing. I would also ask for, especially you brought up Doxa, I feel like is it any of the companies right now that have been rebooted by marketing departments? Is that who are primarily doing it? Like, let's see, Aquastar, Yema probably too. Like, I feel like those companies that have just recently been like brought, the brands that have sort of been resurrected, they're way more enthusiast focused. So, there's a little bit of that, but interesting.
I don't know what the answer is here, because I think also you could definitely argue the point, and I think this is certain. I think you suppose you have to take it on a brand by brand basis, but there is certain watches, and I think Aquastar might be an example. Maybe Ulster might be another one where they've bought back a vintage watch, but I feel like they've preserved the history of the watch by bringing it back. Like sometimes these watches have been lost to time, but they were icons, and maybe bringing them back has come to a new audience. I think I feel like that about Aquastar in particular. But you're right, that's what makes it special, doesn't it? When you're bringing back these one-off pieces or updating them. The Walbrook Skin Diver, I think, is a prime example of this, where you bring it back and updating it. But is there gonna be an oversaturation of it?
Right.
Where it's gonna lose its charm because everybody's creating. Maybe we've passed that point.
I think maybe we have. Because I think I think about in the last couple of years, all of the brands that were hot on the vintage loom that. I personally, I couldn't stand that. I mean, it hurts me because, again, from a practicality standpoint, you're like, practicality 0. And so very like utilitarian, you guys know my watch brands, like name the top 5 utilitarian, like, military cockpit inspired, the loom has to hit, it has to either be radioactive or super luminova, this kind of thing. And so I think that there were a couple of, I can think of at least 2 that if they came out with the Seamaster, if they came out with that Omega, that vintage Omega, if that thing had white loom, I would have bought it. But it
No Time to Die one.
The one that they put that orange loom on, that brown colored loom on. Ugh. And I was like, if you guys just made it with regular colored loom, it would be on my wrist, because it would just look amazing. And like, I guess, and I've seen older like a Seamaster 300s that are like new old stock they were white when they first came out. That loom was just a super light green color. Like it maybe even a little light yellow, but that was it. And yeah, if they reissued it just like that, I want to have a modern version with modern silicone gaskets of a Seamaster 300, of a 1960s Seamaster 300.
I always give Seiko a hard time, but I think some of their reissues, obviously they've done a lot of them to death, like the 62 MAS, but they haven't fallen into that overly vintage loom kind of thing. They have some slightly different coloured loom, but they don't go all the way to the old radium look, which in itself is a weird thing to want to recreate radium, because it was so horrendous of a material.
Yeah.
And, so many people suffered that actually had to apply that to watches. I don't know why you would go for an old radium look on a watch. I don't know what moment in time you think you're capturing, because that was a horrendous time. I think the Radium Girls was the first ever sort of encourages health and safety in companies, or setting up a class action lawsuit against a company.
That's right. Yeah.
But
So I mean, I guess my point is they wanted to capture that. So we definitely have a bunch of brands out there that are trying to sort of capture that. Like, what does the enthusiast want for a vintage reissue? And yeah, maybe we are kind of past it. We're certainly driving it. I mean, Longines knows that this is, that this is a part of their, this is a big part of their world, that we've moved from, and to maybe make an analogy, we've moved from vinyl records that were absolutely mass produced in 1,000 factories in the United States and were played on turntables 1,000 times and then thrown away. We've moved, we're now in watch collecting world. We are now in downtown Detroit Records, recreating the vinyl cutting machine, recording on analog equipment, a vintage recording from a band, and they're only going to do 1,000 pressings. And so maybe we're here. That's maybe a good analogy of like, here's where we are now.
Well, yeah, you might be right. I don't know how I know this fact, but I think I was reading somewhere that Harry Styles released his new album on vinyl, and it sold more vinyl than any vinyl in history, but certainly any vinyl in recent memory. He sold a ridiculous amount of the actual vinyl records. Yeah, maybe this is a resurgence, and maybe that's actually a good thing, because vinyl records have been coming back now for at least the last 20 years, I remember, and they've kept that momentum. It seems that they've been keeping this momentum going, and maybe maybe these vintage models are to stay. These vintage
and we're just settled into. Hey, we'll have we got a bunch of enthusiasts. We've got a bunch of old styles that we'd love to have recreated modern versions of. So maybe that's what we just skipped right over cassettes. Nobody wants the cassettes.
Or mini discs. The poor mini disc.
Yeah, nobody does. Well, the mini discs, like your Casio calculators and your Casio thermometer watch. That's your mini disc. And then and then all the Swatch cassettes we're over those. We just skipped right over that.
What I think is always funny is, and this is an actual prime example of what we're talking about now, is that I think most watch companies would be envious to be as successful as Rolex. Yet Rolex never does this, do they? Rolex never gives anybody what they want. I mean, who would have thought of a left-hand drive green and black? They've never, you could argue one or two cases, you could say they bowed to what people are asking for, but very rarely do they redesign a model. They do allow Tudor to do that. Tudor definitely brings back nostalgia baiting models, don't they? But they do it excellently.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I feel I think the Black Bay is a nostalgia sort of style model. I don't think of the Black Bay as a quote unquote modern. I mean, it is modern, but the style of it is that timeless, classic case shape dive watch, sports watch of the past that is sort of that's kind of that design language has been brought through.
Another interesting point would be that some of these that are reimaginings of the vintage watches now, maybe it's poetic justice that they finally now have a modern movement in there that's now been upgraded and it isn't susceptible to the same fate as perhaps some of the vintage watches where the movements didn't last. Yeah,
I'm 100% on board with this. I think because I look at if we make I'll make a car analogy. I can't believe the cars that I used to look up to and love in the 80s.
Like the Countach.
How friggin' slow and how underpowered these. I mean, like, I just looked at there was a 911 Turbo ad, and they're like, it goes from 0 to 60 in 5.6 seconds, and they're super excited about it. And I'm like, my wife's EV goes from 0 to 60 in like 5 seconds. So no, not really that exciting anymore, guys. And it's just, right. The nostalgia for these like old motors and these, like, oh, we'll get an old car. And you're like, that makes you like, what was it? The Knight Rider, the Pontiac that was, that they turned into the Knight Rider. That was a 5-liter V8 that made 150 horsepower. And,
the DeLorean. They say that about the DeLorean, don't they?
Yeah, it's an absolute slug.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's like meanwhile, mom in her CRV is like, taking old Camaros at the light, just walking away. So, I'm here for, I'm here for vintage, but with new internals, sort of capture that, that style. It's interesting that the brands. Do you think Seiko's doing it?
Seiko do it. Seiko are gonna kill it. I think. I think if anybody's gonna end this this nostalgic watch designs, it'll be Seiko, because they've the standard Seiko line, not the Grand Seiko, of course, because they've been certainly doing the Willard case, haven't they? And the 62 MAS to almost to death now. You can get it in every color you've ever wanted it in,
right?
And that's also a little bit sneaky, isn't it? Because a lot of these they are doing and making them limited edition, and then but I feel like there's a bit of a not a backlash, but the one that I made the video on, which was the reissue of the 1968 diver, and I caught a lot of flack in the comments section about that, because I argued that it was very overpriced for what it was, and a lot of people didn't agree with me. And but the thing is that a lot of these, you can still buy this one online. It was a limited edition,
right?
But it's still available. You can still buy it online, and not only that, but
truly limited.
Exactly.
You still get it, Exactly. So they're not maybe selling it, Yeah, for me, I think it was when the modders started making the 62 MAS case. I think once that was available for modding, I was just like, all right, we can just make whatever vintage Seiko you want. you want Marine Master hands on a 1962 reissue. I got you. So
and I suppose that's what's kept a lot of it alive as well. I suppose it's both. It's an interesting and I suppose it's an interesting thing to follow, isn't it? To where it goes. I mean, most companies that are bringing out these reissues are doing them very well. Some of the Bulliver ones I'm not crazy about, because some of them they expanded the proportions quite a bit.
Right.
So they're larger than the original ones. I would have loved a Devil Diver, but they put that Miyota 8000 series in it without the hacking and the really noisy rotor. And
I didn't realize that. Yeah.
I'm not a watch snob, but I'm definitely a movement accuracy snob.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, because and again, that extols the benefits of a new modern move. And yes, I'm sure whatever it had in it in 1970 was probably plus 30 minus 20, but come on, we want we want a 350 horsepower Honda CRV. Come on, like, what's going on? Just give us something that's super accurate, super reliable, modern seals, modern movement. I think I was thinking about this earlier. I think the pinnacle of like enthusiast models for enthusiast's sake brand would be Dan Henry.
Yes, I would agree. Yeah, that's creating it's almost archiving classic models,
right?
Isn't it? But with brand new internals.
Yeah. And you look at
like
any of them,
kit car maybe, like
right?
A kit card not Viper, what are they called now?
Maybe the Cobra.
The Cobra.
Maybe the Cobra. Yeah. Maybe the Cobra. Because like you get in a kit car Ferraris and that gets bad. That gets uncanny valley real fast. But like nobody's going to be able to find a untouched AC Ace from Europe, import it, and then put an old, V8 in it and turn it into an actual Shelby Cobra. So just go and buy the kit. It's fine. The Factory 5 kit. We're good with it. And yeah, I think it's like the best of. It's like the resto mod, right?
Yeah, but I suppose as well, which maybe we will see coming to the watch world, is I doubt it, but what came to the car world, where you've got drop-in quartz movements for vintage movements, where you could just pull out a vintage mechanical movement from, say, an old Hamilton or something, and drop in a electric.
Who is it? Like, what was it? Who are the? There's a couple of companies that were doing new old stock. I can't think of. One of the bigger companies was doing a new old stock movement, and then randomly, like Fears was doing a new old stock movement, and I thought that was interesting. So maybe that's sort of a good analogy of, like, you find a company that has a bunch of these movements on the shelf that can grab them.
I think it was
yeah. Maybe that sounds right. But they were taking these new old stock movements, doing the Swiss watch complete disassembly, complete clean, complete new lubricants, reassembly, chrono certified, etc., and like putting it back together into a watch with modern seals. Totally fine with that too.
And I think the other thing as well is that we're definitely seeing these vintage reissues, aren't we? But also, listening to enthusiasts can sometimes be quite tricky, because this is a lot of what micro brands fall into, isn't it? A lot of the micro brands gravitate towards these more vintage style watches, and I'm not sure that that's necessarily easy to get. I know the guys at Veyer struggle to.
Veyer's a good example of people, and Christopher Ward taking their forums and taking feedback, enthusiast feedback. I mean, that you really have to the design department needs to really filter that, because if you do a Kickstarter where you let a bunch of enthusiasts design your vintage dive watch, okay, it's going to look kind of like every other vintage dive watch. You know what I mean? It's going to have that, like, it's going to either have a turtle case or an old compressor case. And of course it's going to be sapphire. And of course it's going to have giant loom hands on it. And of course it's going to be, you know what I'm saying? And it's like, it just ends up being, you end up in this land of sort of unexciting Kickstarter type designed by committee watches that all look, so I mean, that's why I said Longines, I think, did it good with this diver. That definitely went through the design department. That was not designed by the forums, if you will, but there's a line there where there's a wrong way to do this and the right way to say, yes, we know you want modern materials, but this watch would never have a ceramic bezel. And if we gave it a ceramic bezel, it would look shiny, brand new all the time, and that's maybe not our design. And if you go over to the forums and they're like, must have ceramic bezel, must be able to jam into a door and never harm it, and you're like, it's fine. Aluminum bezel is fine. Painted aluminum. We've been doing it for 100 years. It's good.
Yeah, that's true. I suppose the irony is that a lot of these watches that are vintage reissues, the originals weren't actually that. A lot of them had different materials and they aged naturally, and that's what made them icons. And they were also the prime example with Seiko is the 62 MAS was an affordable watch at the time, and now you could argue it's quite unaffordable.
Right.
It's certainly not a. It's certainly a purchase you have to think about instead of just, dropping it.
Right.
But
yeah, and I've said this before with Seiko. It's like it's very they'll have models that'll come out that if you really love it, then maybe it's worth it for you. Like what's an extra couple $100? Like if that's like the one. then I get it. But yeah, it is hard to swallow when their price point is kind of all over the board. And then I really think the modding community for Seiko should be keeping their prices honest. You know, I mean, like if you look at any of those new like limited edition super style whatever, you could go over to a modder and spend half of that and get exactly what you want. You know, this sort of thing as a one of one. So
yeah, absolutely. Well, that was a really interesting conversation there. Guys, let us know what you think over on the Facebook group. Join us on the Discord. Definitely subscribe to this podcast. We really appreciate you listening, and we'll see you next time on Casual Watch Talk.